KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger, a public affairs program featuring stories from all over the Central Valley with Sevag Tateosian, 90.7 KFSR.
I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Welcome to the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative, Fresno and Clovis. You're watching the Central Valley Ledger and listening to the program as well. Our guest this week is local attorney Kendall Simsarian. Kendall, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, nice to be here.
So the reason I wanted you to come on the show is because I see you everywhere. Grizzlies games, on your bike, in downtown walking around, and I know a lot of other people also see you everywhere. So I wanted to get you on so that we can kind of learn a little bit more about you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I do like to participate in events that are going on downtown. My office is downtown. I've been downtown for almost 30 years now and had my own office here for about 25 years. I've been in that Pacific Southwest or Security Bank building for almost all of that time. And so I enjoy the events that go on downtown. I like participating in downtown events and just like being here. I don't live here in downtown, but I do come down here a lot.
Well, and I bet you get the question of, do you live in downtown? Because you're always in downtown. And sometimes I see you're dressed comfortably as well in downtown. So I'm like, does he live in downtown or not?
Right, well, I try to ride my bike when I can. And it's good exercise, a little good for the environment too. And I try to make sure that if I don't have court, that I ride my bike to work. It's only about 5 miles, so it's not a real long distance, but it does get my blood going and kind of helps out. You know, in the morning, it's not too bad. Even on our hottest days, it still can be usually in the 70s at the most early in the morning. So it's not too bad. I enjoy riding the bike anyway. It's sometimes a little difficult dealing with traffic, and you know, you get over that a little bit, and so I get used to that.
So we covered a lot of ground in a couple of minutes, so I'm going to kind of dissect a little bit our conversation.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, were you raised here? Were you born here?
No, I grew up in San Francisco.
Okay.
And in fact, my parents were from there, and my parents and brother still live there. So I go up and visit a lot, and I'm familiar with the Bay Area. I went to Berkeley and lived in Berkeley and Oakland, and I went to Santa Clara for law school, so I lived in San Jose and Santa Clara. So I've been around the Bay Area and hadn't really decided to live in Fresno until I got a job here after about a year after I'd graduated from law school.
So that was my question. How did you end up in Fresno? And you know, as a lawyer, you can be everywhere, anywhere in California at least, and you know, do well. And you graduated in San Francisco area, and you ended up here. How?
Right. Well, I had a lot of family. Being Armenian, of course, there's family here in Fresno. And I figured I would look for jobs. I was looking for jobs in the Bay Area. I had a job in San Francisco, and I was still looking for other type of work in the Bay Area and in Fresno. I didn't look down in Los Angeles or other parts of California. I really wanted to remain in one of those two areas. When I did get a job in Fresno, I decided to move down and see how it went. And it wasn't long before I enjoyed living in Fresno and really liked being here, and just made a decision that I wasn't interested in moving back.
You could have. I mean, here, practice a little bit, get experience, and now you're more valuable to the San Francisco firms. What made you say, you know what, I'm going to stay in Fresno?
Well, a lot of times people do that. They come to, say, a city that seems a little less urban than, say, San Francisco or Los Angeles, and then they decide, well, they're going to come here and then get experience in the courtroom, say, and then go back. But Fresno was urban enough for me. There was plenty to do here. I really enjoyed being here. I liked the fact that I could actually buy a house and was able to do that rather than if I lived in San Francisco all this time, I'd probably still be renting.
Cost of living here, I mean, is much less.
The cost of living, particularly for housing costs, is far better than it is in the Bay Area.
So you're unique in that you've been in Fresno for decades.
Yes.
City is changing.
The city has changed a lot. When I first moved here, I was at Cedar and Herndon.
Okay.
I lived up there, and I was so surprised that I could get to my downtown office in under 15 minutes, and yet there were so many areas around there that were undeveloped. They were kind of farmland, but they weren't being used as farm. They were just kind of big, acres and acres lots. And it was surprising to me that there were places nearby that weren't being used as residences and were so close to downtown Fresno.
When you were looking at moving your office or starting your office, you selected downtown and you stayed here. Why? Some people started here and they ended up north.
I never considered moving out of downtown. I could say it was just because I like downtown, but I have to say also doing criminal law that I'm in court a lot, and I'd say probably I'm in court about 3 days out of the week, 3 or 4 days. So it really helps to be downtown for easy access. Sometimes hearings that are scheduled for the mornings don't occur until the afternoon, and it helps to be downtown. So having an office downtown was, besides the fact that it was convenient, it was never really a consideration for me to open up an office somewhere else.
What area of law do you do, and how did you select that area?
I do all criminal defense, and the criminal defense sort of selected me. The job that I first got was a criminal defense job, and when I moved to another job after I left the one that was just criminal defense, I was working for an attorney that was doing all types of law. He was doing family law, personal injury, business law, and criminal defense. And when I started on my own, I felt like that was something I could do. I had practiced all those fields, and I figured I could go into all of them. I did some family law and personal injury, and I just didn't enjoy the family law and personal injury and business law as much as the criminal law. Turned out that I had enough work to do with criminal law. It turned out that there's a lot of work just keeping up on the latest developments in criminal law, because there are new cases that come out every day. I actually try to read those cases every chance I get. And so trying to keep up and be accomplished in your profession as a general practice lawyer is almost impossible these days. I know there were the old school guys did it way back when, but it's difficult to do anymore, and I enjoyed criminal law the most anyway.
You're in the Pacific Southwest building, or what was known as the Security Bank building.
Right.
Some exciting things are happening over there too. We've had the owner of that building, Sevag, on the program before, and so what's going on over there? I hear some housing.
Well, it's been at least 10 years or more since the previous owner had started installing residences. They got permits and changed, I believe they even changed the zoning a little bit so that they could have residences downtown, because there really hadn't been any right on that Fulton Mall superblock, which was the area of the Fulton Mall and Mariposa and Merced. And they hadn't had residences. The owner put some in, and they tried to sell them at first. They had a lot of trouble selling them, and then came around about 2008 when there was a problem with the housing market and everything was going down, and all of a sudden the value of those as condos, as they were intended to be, went way down. So at that point I think she started renting them a little bit, but never really recovered from that, and eventually they had to declare bankruptcy. The bank got the building, and then Sevag got it from there. And he's done a lot of improvements as well, increasing the number of floors and apartments in the building, as well as renting them rather than trying to sell them.
And you're in a unique spot, because I don't know of anywhere else or anybody else who works in a place that has residential kind of on top of it. I mean, that's pretty cool, like the big city, right?
That's true. I let the residential people do what they're going to do, and I keep to myself, and it doesn't really interfere one way or the other. But we certainly share the common area of the the elevators downstairs and the whole Fulton area. So
It's got to be cool. You're in your suit going up to your office, and then here there's someone in pajamas and slippers going up to their house.
that might be, but I might be just as likely to be in my casual clothes with my bike too. So, you never know.
Someone who has had an office in downtown for so long, the mall is opening up. It's actually opened up in several places. Are you excited as someone that's a tenant?
Well, as a tenant, it probably doesn't matter that much to me one way or the other. It has been very frustrating over the last couple of years to direct people to my office because it's no longer the Fulton Mall. It's no longer, there's fences everywhere and construction going on, so that's been difficult. As it was before, it was always easy to describe to people that I was across from the courthouse right at the clock tower. It certainly will be easier for people to get there to find out where I am with the street going through. I am excited. I was very much in support of the street coming through. Once they started doing it and I saw the plans for it, I had some misgivings, especially the fact riding a bike all the time, they didn't have a bike lane, and I felt like they could have done that if they wanted to. Their excuse was that they wanted to encourage slow traffic, and that not having a bike lane would possibly do that. Of course, I don't know any bike riders that would like not to have a bike lane, but that was a little annoying to me. But you know what? It's here. It's coming. I'm excited about new beginnings, and I hope that it can do something to improve the outlook of downtown. I mean, I love downtown the way it was 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 20 years ago. So if it's better, that's great. If it changes, we'll just roll with it.
So now, can you ride your bike then on the street there, or how does that work?
Well,
you must share, I bet.
Actually, it was a little easier to ride when it was a mall because you only had to deal with some pedestrians, but now you have to deal with traffic. The traffic is very light as of yet, since at this point it's still a street to nowhere because it hasn't gone all the way through. The north end and the south end are open, but the middle is still, they're still working on it. I think they got about 2 weeks to go. They've been working real hard to get that middle section of the mall and done, and they're going to have that celebration on the Saturday the 21st.
Right, and that's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, I'm excited to be there.
So talk a little bit about how you select the cases that you take. The lawyers have this misconception, or maybe it's true, that everything that comes their way, they take it, they fight for it, that whole making money right away. Do you critique cases before you take them?
I think a lot of people think that I would take a case or not take a case based on the type of charge. For example, there are certain particularly offensive charges that people just say, jurors say, I can't sit in judgment of that type of case. I can't be fair. But as a lawyer, the cases that I don't want to take are the ones that I don't think that I can be of much assistance to somebody.
Okay.
If I think that the case is either is so strong that there's no way to win it, then I would evaluate that. I would let the person know that that was the case, and I would make sure that they were aware of why they would be hiring me and what the purpose would be.
And then when you're going into trial now, so I appreciate your time in coming on the program because you were prepping before you got here.
That's true.
How difficult or how time-consuming is actually prepping a trial? Because some people think, oh, you show up in court, you say a few things that sound good, and you call it a day.
I prepare a lot for my trials. I sit down and I get ready questions to ask on direct and on cross-examination, I write down what I'm going to say at opening statement and closing argument. I try to write down the things that I'm going to ask jurors about. Now, there's only so much reading you can do while asking questions. You don't want to be buried in your paperwork and not listen to answers that are given to you. But I do try to write down, at least write it down. It helps me keep it in my head and helps me ask the questions that I know need to be asked. And that way I can go through, ask the questions, hopefully without the use of my notes, but still have them there if necessary.
As we speak, there are documentaries and specials about Scott Peterson and the trial and jury, and the jury there. People are saying that the jury there was unfair, stuff like that. I want to ask you about jury selection. How important is that as a defense attorney?
Well, I've heard attorneys say that 99% of cases are won or lost before the opening statement is given, meaning that jury selection is that important. Selecting the proper jury is 99% of the case. I don't know if that statistic is correct, but I do know that it is important to have jurors that will come at the case with an open mind. They have to be jurors that are willing to look at the evidence critically, because the fact is that in most criminal cases, the bulk of the investigation, the bulk of the evidence that comes in is going to be prosecution evidence. And prosecution evidence, if looked at without a critical eye, can sometimes appear overwhelming. But I think it's my job to point out to jurors that, look, you have to look at prosecution evidence critically and not simply accept it because it's either testified to by a police officer or because the prosecutor states it. It's got to be looked at critically, and what I try to do is find jurors who are willing to be critical enough that they are willing to look at the case fairly and even-handedly.
A lot of times someone gets arrested and everyone already, and I'm guilty of this too, so I'm no angel. Someone gets arrested, you know, it's in the papers and we're immediately judging. How could he or she do this? They're guilty. Just because someone's arrested, does that mean they're guilty?
Well, it certainly doesn't, simply because of the standard required. An arrest requires probable cause. A police officer has to believe that it's more likely than not that the person committed a crime. So, and you know, that's sometimes is the case on arrests, sometimes it isn't the case on arrests. And if there's an arrest that occurs with less than probable cause, then we try to show a judge without a jury that in fact the arrest should never have been made because it wasn't likely that the person is guilty. But the jury has to look at it differently. The jury doesn't get to look at it the same way as a police officer. The police officer can look at the evidence and say, well, it looks like this guy did it, so I'm going to arrest him. But a jury has to look at it far more analytically and critically, because they have to find beyond any reasonable doubt that the person did it. It's not enough that it's likely or probably or possibly.
So in every trial that the defense loses, you always hear, we're going to appeal. The appeal is coming. But is it that easy to get in the door of an appeal?
It's easy to get in the door, but winning an appeal is not so easy. The standard is substantial evidence on appeal. I have handled quite a number of appeals, and I've done appeals to the 5th District Court of Appeals here in Fresno, as well as the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco, which is federal, and as well as there's a local appellate division of the Superior Court here in Fresno, and they only require substantial evidence. So if you lose a trial and are not able to convince a jury that there is a reasonable doubt, it's very unlikely that judges looking at the case, and they just look at, they don't take testimony, they just look at the evidence based on what's on paper. All they need is what's called substantial evidence to to affirm that verdict.
What's your advice to up-and-coming attorneys? Now, there are some people who go through law school, they don't end up attorneys. I'm case in point. I'm at the county. Who would have thought?
Okay.
But what's your advice for up-and-coming law school grads?
Well, I didn't know what I would enjoy doing when I left law school. I know that a lot of law school students have an idea of where they want to go, what they want to do, and my best advice, I think, is not to be too stuck on that particular idea. You know, there are different kinds of law. There's litigation. There's writing contracts. There's drafting wills and trusts. These are all different types of law that some people are better suited for. To me, I like being in a courtroom. I like handling criminal law. I think that when people think of what a lawyer does when you watch on TV, being a criminal lawyer is closest to that. You're in the courtroom all the time. You're always in front of a judge or a jury, and you always have somebody on the other side in front of you rather than handling interrogatories or drafting a document.
Now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about some of the other stuff you're involved in.
Okay.
You know, I wanted you here again because I see you everywhere.
All right.
Talk about bike riding. I mean, it's a passion of yours, or you enjoy it?
I like cycling. I do both recreational and commuting. The distinction there is that recreational is people that are riding long distances and going up hills and mountains and that sort of thing.
And we see them, by the way, in groups along the road when you're going up to like Squaw Valley or something.
Right, and Friant and Table Mountain and those type of rides. I enjoy doing that. It keeps you in shape. I try to keep fit that way. But then I also enjoy the commuting. The commuting is difficult partially because of the just driving around. There's a lot of, especially the infrastructure between where I live, which is up towards Ashland and Maroa area, and downtown, there's not much. There's a few bike lanes here and there, but there's not too much. You actually notice in North Fresno that there are lots of bike lanes up there, and in fact, that's part of the reason for that is because some of the bike advocates, myself included, made an effort to change the way streets are made when they're first building the streets. So you open up a new neighborhood, and the rule is that when you build a street, you have to have a bike lane in it. And so that's why there's more bike lanes in North Fresno.
That's interesting. Some people, like me included, think, you know what, if I bike to work, it's going to take me a half hour. But depending on where you live, obviously, but for you, how long does it take you to get from like Ashland and Maroa to downtown?
It's under a half hour. I try not to, especially coming into work. I don't really want to get hot and sweaty and everything, and that's why I mentioned earlier that it's even on very hot days in the summertime, early in the morning, it's not so bad. But I try to take it easy and leave myself a little bit of time. Pretty much by definition, if I'm biking to work, I don't have court that morning, and so usually I don't have quite the schedule that I have to maintain. So I can get here. I'm not going to be in a hurry to get to work on days like that. So I would say I've done it. I think my record was under 17 minutes to get home, but I don't want to have to do that coming into work.
So there are bike organizations then out there, correct, for people to join?
Oh, sure. There's the Fresno County Bicycle Coalition. There's the Fresno Cycling Club. The first one, again, does more advocacy and is more commuting oriented. The second one, the Cycling Club, does more of the recreational cycling. And then there's just kind of groups of cyclists that you see. The Bike Party, for example, the third Friday, I'm going to advertise third Friday of the month.
Third Friday of the month.
Yeah, they meet at Fresno High around 7:30, and those are the people that you see with all kinds of lights, usually 100 or more people riding along. They have similar things, and I know San Jose has a bike party, and my friend did it the other day, and there was thousands of people up
Wow,
there.
so there's actually, for people who don't know, there's actually something called a bike party where if you like to ride bikes, you get together and you simply ride together.
Yeah, it's an easy way to get with other cyclists, and everybody's very friendly. It's a slow-paced ride. There's families, there's children a lot of times, and although sometimes the children are really the ones who are going faster than anybody, but it's very family-oriented. And a lot of people riding, they try to be safe. They try to make sure that everybody's wearing a helmet. They try to make sure to stop at red lights and that sort of thing. And I know there's always criticism of some cyclists that don't follow the laws, but the bike party tries to make sure that everybody stays together, follows the laws. Sometimes when there's a big group of us, they may, rather than split everybody up, we may try to keep everybody together, and so they may get to the very end of a green light or the beginning of a red light, but there's always people there that are kind of, letting traffic know that there's more cyclists coming, and we have a really good response. We find there's always somebody who just has to be mad for some reason at not having 2 full lanes to drive in when they only need 1 anyway. But generally, almost everybody is really happy and excited, and we get people all the time saying, when's your next ride, and what are you doing? What is this? What group is this? And it's just really, because the people are having fun. You can tell people are having a good time. People have their lights on, and it's really a good, a good event. And we got one guy who installs those lights on people's wheels, and so really helps out.
That's a perfect way to end the program this week. We are out of time, Kendall, but how can people get in touch with you? Do you want people to call you and talk to you?
Sure, I'm happy to talk to people. I really enjoy having certainly, clients are good, but I really enjoy just showing people the court system sometimes. So I really like to, especially younger people that aren't really familiar, because people don't understand very well about the court system, and to see it, it's a very different experience. People are always stunned when they see what's going on in court and understand what's actually happening on a day-to-day basis. They don't understand it, and you can tell that when you see people's posts on Facebook and that sort of thing. They just don't understand what's going on.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program.
All right, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
That's all for this edition of the Central Valley Ledger. We're recording out of the beautiful downtown Fresno studios of the Community Media Access Collaborative, Fresno and Clovis. Our guest has been Kendall Simsarian, a local attorney. Thank you to the volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible. We couldn't do it without you. They're in the studios now making us look and sound good. Their names appear at the end in the credits. Thank you to those listening to this broadcast on 90.7 FM, KFSR Fresno, and to those watching on CMAC, Comcast 93 and AT&T 99. We hope you enjoyed the program this week. Tune in next week to a new edition.
KFSR and CMAC present the Central Valley Ledger every Sunday morning at 11:30. For a complete program schedule, visit kfsr.org.